So I want to touch on what is a business cycle. So if you see a graph like that, this is like a roller coaster. How many of you have been on a roller coaster? Okay, very good. I've been on many. I have a book about roller coaster. Yeah. Try to hit all of them in my lifetime. Now, I don't think I could get on any more of it. Trying to specialize at one point. My family, not me.
Thank you.
So this is peak, and this is called a trough. So what is a peak? A peak of a business cycle is where you're on top. Okay, and this is kind of like your graph, so you got GDP here, and this would be like year, could be in terms of months, could be in terms of year. So peak is a high point of a business cycle, and then if you drop down like in a roller coaster, this is when you scream. Remember that? So when you go downhill like that, we call this a recession. Okay? And in a very serious kind of recession, we actually have a word for it, which you have come across already. We call it depression. This is a more serious term to a greater degree, for recession. So sometimes we use the word contraction for recession, which is a state of the economy. This is a period in which economy is growing at a rate significantly below normal. And normally there is an agency out there, it's called Bureau of Economic Analysis. What they do is they track the activities in the economy. And then if the GDP, a real GDP, which means you have taken into account inflation, and if they have found that GDP had been fallen for 2 or more consecutive quarters, that would be 6 months, then they declared it, we're in recession now. So that's what happened. Let's take a note with this. You could also refer to this recession as, the GDP growth is not, it's very little. It's not negative, it's positive, but it's so little that we could also classify it as recession. We look at some numbers coming up. And of course, as I said, depression is a greater degree of what is recession. Okay, so that's just, you come across all these terms before. Next is term expansion. So expansion would happen like from here, you have a peak and then trough is like the valley. And then the next time you go up to the next peak right here. Now this is when you're gaining speed when you're on the roller coaster. Remember this time that you're going up. So that's called expansion. The state of the economy, when you're moving from the lowest point to the next peak, we call it expansion. So again, expansion would be the period in which the economy is growing at significantly, above the normal rate. And a greater degree of what we call expansion will be a boom. So some of you have heard about the term boom. When was the last boom that you hear about?
Baby boom.
Oh, baby boom. Okay, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to that. So baby booms, so that would happen during the, right after the Second World War. So that would be around 1945, yeah, that's right. Because at that time, actually during, and definitely after. Because remember we talked about that before, during the Second World War, the women started to come out to the factory and start building all this artillery and machine gun because the men are fighting in the Europe, right? Which contributed towards a labor force participation rate and to some extent economic growth. Because you're building a lot of this defense stuff, right? All this machine gun, tank, artillery. So you're boosting your GDP to some extent. That will be contributed to remember your C plus I plus G plus NX? So that would be your G, your government expenditure, in terms of military expansion, or built up. Okay, so again, peak is the beginning of a recession, is a high point of the business cycle, the trough is the end of recession. So typically, these are just definition. And then we'll look at some number, and this should also be in your book. Oh, we'll look at this first. Yeah, let's talk about this first. Again, you know, if you want to do economics of disaster, you will also have a diagram like that. So all this incident will be various incidents of hurricanes or tornado or tsunami. Although tsunami does not affect this country, they call it tsunami in Japan. In this country, we call it hurricane. Okay, so here it is. Let's take a look. Let's look at World War II first. Okay. Now you see that there is a jump going up, expansion. Now, typically, everything that we see, that you see that we try to outline here, that we try to indicate or point out or highlight, whatever word to use, are recession or depression, except for this so-called baby boom that some of you want to be just mentioned here, because that one is going up. So Great Depression began around 1929, October, the Black Friday, October. Forgot what day, October 29, I think maybe. So it drops and then it goes up. And then we have a few periods that some of the periods that we have talked about before in the course of this semester. So for example, one of the first serious recession was the 73 to 75. Remember we have a label for it? Anybody remember? That was the first oil shock. Remember we talked about that. We told you the story about the oil embargo. How the nation of Israel was attacked on the day of Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday. And then in 81, 82, or late 70s, because remember we talked about the second oil shock, when the country of Iran was changing regimes, and that what happened? Yeah, the whole bunch of hostages got, Americans got taken hostages during that late 70s. And then of course the repercussion, usually there's a lack of 1 or 2 years. 81, 82, we experienced the next recession, which we call the second oil shock. Now what about 1990, 91? I'm not sure if you mentioned that one before. So anybody remember what happened? We talked about it a little bit.
Gulf War.
Sorry?
The Gulf War.
Very good, the Gulf War. Thank you. Yeah, so that was during the Desert Storm, 1989. Remember Senior George Bush was the president trying to stop Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, from invading Kuwait. In fact, he already invaded Kuwait, so the U.S. was trying to stop that from going further. So Desert Storm happened in 89, and after that we experienced that recession. So you see, a lot of this recession has got something to do with political situation. Politics, yeah. The situation in the Middle East and so forth. And 2001 recession, what do we call it? Anybody remember? I think we talked about that a little bit too. What happened well, yeah, you know what happened. 2001, we had 9/11, September 11th. But before that, we talked about one more incident. In March of 2001, anybody remember what happened? The year 2000 was a golden year in terms of technological stocks, remember, because internet became commercialized in 1995. So all those years were like golden years. You know, Yahoo, all this, Amazon.com, Google's, all this company were doing great. If you buy their stocks, you know, all the technological stocks, Seagate, Cyrix, AMD, chip makers, Intel. Yeah, if you own your stocks, 100% at least increase, yeah, for several years. And then something happened in March of 2001, just before September 11 hit. Remember, I think I wrote down the incident. We call it internet bubble burst. Because they were really overpriced, all those technological stocks. So then a lot of people lost a lot of money. So, and then to add on top of that, 9/11 happened. So we had the recession there. 2007, 2009, that's a pretty big dip if you see right here? So that was what we call Great Recession that you had experienced in your lifetime. It's, what is that now? This is 2016 now, you know, almost, well, less than 10 years ago, but yeah, almost 10 years now. I can't believe it, been that long. Yeah, since the beginning of it. Okay, now this chart here, this is what we ask you on the exam. Okay, we'll sometime take out a subset we ask. So let's be sure that you understand this table or chart very well. You see a number of columns here. So what we want to identify here is periods of recession, which is basically what you saw me highlight earlier. But now you're seeing it in terms of months and year. See right here? You got two periods. One is peak, one is trough. So it's like over there. So remember peak, right, is usually, this is a period. So usually we have the month and the year. I think it's too much to say what days, you know. So we capture it in month and year. So we have a number of periods here, all the way 1929 to 2009, kind of like what you saw earlier in that graph. And so I'm gonna ask you a few questions, you answer it, but you can look at this, you can answer it. So let's look at the third column. Third column shows you the duration of the recession from peak to the trough, you know, because if you look at it, from a peak to the trough, you basically, this is a drop down, right? This is when you scream when a roller coaster goes down the hill. So tell me, by looking at that third column, which period is the longest in terms of the, I guess, a recession, yeah, in terms of the number of months?
The first one.
The first one, okay, because you can see that it's 43, and that's during the Great Depression, 1929 to 1933, 43 months. So that's almost like, what, 3 years and, how many? 7 months, something like that. Okay, what's the next one?
2007.
We got 16 here.
It was 18.
Agree? Oh, we got an 18, very good, thank you. Okay, so that's the Great Recession, which is also quite bad. And then you have 16, a couple of 16s here, and that's during the first and the second oil shocks years. Okay, so you don't have problem of identifying something like that. So let's look at the highest unemployment rate. So which one?
The first one.
First one as well, okay. And that will be 24.9%. That's considered extremely, extremely high, yeah. Historically, I think the US, even right now, we experience somewhere between 4 to 5%. So yeah, 25% is extremely high. That was during the Great Depression. When's the next one down?
The second one.
19, okay. And that's sort of like during the, after the Great Depression, because a lot of, I mentioned this before to you, that there were a lot of historians, economists even, disagree the period of when this Great Depression actually ended. A lot of the time we hear that, it ended around 1933. But there were some historians and even economists argue that, it didn't really end until into the Second World War. So if you look at these two periods together, you know, then yeah. So these two are the highest period, and then 19%. And that also tell you that it takes a while to get out of recession. It's not so easy. See, 2007 till now, it's been 9 years. Have we got out of it? Look at the interest rate. That's still very low. It's inching up very, very slowly. So anytime you have a major recession, it takes a while to get back up. So likewise, when you talk about this economics of disaster, same thing. Probably take a while to get back to normal economically if you try to rebuild economy. It's like after the war, same thing. Okay, so come down all the way, and then we got 10% highest employment here. And I think I mentioned this before. During the Great Recession, I think in Robeson County, the unemployment rate was about 12%, which is considered very high. And anybody from Laurinburg County here? I think it was about 16%. Anybody from Moore County, Southern Pinehurst? So I think that county did not experience that high unemployment rate. I want to say it's less than 10%. Yeah, somewhere between 7 to 8, somewhere there. Okay, so what does that tell you though? Do you see a pattern here? Every time you have a severe or long period of recession, you also at the same time experience very high unemployment rate. So what do we call that kind of unemployment? Remember we got 3 types, so which one is it?
Cyclical?
That would be cyclical unemployment, that's correct. Because that's unemployment, the type of unemployment I mentioned that go ahead and call Obama at 2 a.m. in the morning and wake him up and say, we got a problem, Mr. President. What's the problem? And that should wake me up. It's cyclical unemployment. But please do not call him up at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell him we got frictional unemployment or structural unemployment. Say, oh no, go back and get your economics, take more economic classes. Because cyclical unemployment is a type of unemployment that is related to recession. And you see the evidence of it. The next column, second last column, is changes in real GDP growth. So this is all in percentage, and you see some negative, you also see some positive. Now remember earlier I said, if you experience recession, you could also have some positive growth, but it's not high. It's low enough that we could still call it recession. Because you could be coming down 2 consecutive quarters and still have positive number, but then the growth rate is not high, like 0.1, 0.8. The rest are all negative. You got one that's about 2.3. Nevertheless, not high enough to call it expansion. So actually classify into the so-called recession here. Now the last column is sort of important because we actually will ask you a question like that on the test. So the last column is about the duration of subsequent expansion in terms of months. What does that mean? So meaning that you got recession, right? You come down to this point trough. So what about the next period, the next number of months before you hit the peak? In other words, expansion. So let's look at the first one. First one, say 50. How do we get 50? You get 50 by?
Subtract the peak from the trough dates.
Okay, very good. Take the next peak, and then the difference between the next peak and the first trough and the next peak, because that's what happened. See what I mean? So the expansion is from trough to peak. So in other words, you would look at this period, March 1933 to May 1937. That's about, is that 4 years? Yeah, 4 years plus 2 months, correct? 4 times 12, 48 plus 2 months, so you got 50. That's how you get there. So which one is the highest number? Which one? 120, yes. So that will be right here. And that is talking about from 1991 to 2001. Okay, March to March. So that's exactly 10 years. 120 divided by 12 is 10. So that's 10 years period. This is in terms of months, okay? And that's typically during the Bill Clinton's administration. So a lot of people want to say, oh yeah, Bill Clinton get the credit, I mean, I'm not for either party, but I also have heard argument that that's because, you see, all the economic event takes time for it to come about. This is called laggard effects. This laggard effects could take months and sometimes even a few years for it to come about. So there's a lot of people say, well, Bill Clinton experiences a period in which you have low debt, low national savings. Remember, we look at that. That's because before him, wasn't it Junior? No, Junior came, George Bush came after 2001. Yeah. Who was before him? Who was before Bill Clinton?
George H.W.
I'm sorry?
Wasn't it George H.W.?
1989, that's right, yeah, the senior George Bush, right. So, and some people say, well, it was the, credit goes to him because, you don't experience it 2 months later. But that's something, if you're interested, you could get into that political debate and dig out all the evidence. So anyway, the highest, right. So the longest period of the expansion was during that 10 years period in recent years. And then if you look at this 73 right here, that's not too bad. That would be from 2001 to 2007. You got 73 months, see. So let's look at what happened there. Remember that 73 months. So here it is. That's our so-called Great Recession. And I think a lot of you will be doing topics like that because during the last half of this semester, a lot of emphasis will be on the last 3 chapters and then chapter 10 as well. So these are the 4 chapters that are mandatory. In other words, I will not drop any of the tests on these last 4 chapters. But the first few chapters, I could drop 1 after midterm. So the reason that this is so important is because a lot of times students who have taken macroeconomics, they were told, if you have not studied or learned anything about Keynesian monetary or fiscal policy, you really have not taken macroeconomics class. Just hardly just touch the fringe, of the subject. Like GDP, unemployment, all those are good and well, but you got to talk about the policy, the Keynesian and the monetary policy, which will be the next few chapters that we get into. Okay, so there it is. NBER stands for National Bureau of Economics Research. So this is an agency, federal agency that would decide, determine like when a recession actually began. So they did they decided that recession, or what we later call Great Recession, would begin in December of 2007. And then as you saw earlier, we look at that last chart, that was the 73 months of expansion before the recession hit. Okay, and then this is important right here. There are 4 important monthly indicators that we use to try to decide. How do you know? I mean, like, what are you looking at? Okay, you say things are not growing well, the GDP numbers are not doing well, but exactly what sectors are you looking at? So here it is, 4 of those. And we have a name for it. Let's see, I think I must have. Okay, here it is. See that word down here? Coincident indicators. Coincident indicators are referring to these 4 indicators here that the NBER, this agency, is used to calculate or to determine whether there is a recession. So they will look at things like industrial production, like factories and mines, see how they're doing, and then they also look at the sales in manufacturing, wholesale, and retail. That covers a lot of areas there, a lot of sectors. Because, manufacturing, you could look at car manufacturing, factory like textile, mineral, there's a lot of stuff there. Wholesale, that's all across all sectors, economy-wide. Retail, that's, again, there's a lot of sectors out there. It could be banking, computing industry will be more in the manufacturing, I think. Okay, and then you also look at non-farm employment. Why non-farm? What's wrong if you look at farm employment? What's wrong? The farm employment, you would have more fluctuation, correct? Because you would have, for example, in the summertime, okay, this is a good example, talk about this hurricane, so, so a lot of crops are probably destroyed. So what's the point of hiring workers out there, because, so this farming number, employment relating to farming industries are very much seasonal, very much affected by the weather. So if you have a low season because of hurricane or because of heavy rainfall or whatever, or it could be a tornado that wipe out everything, then it's not so accurate. Non-farm employment, on the other hand, is less. I'm not saying totally, less depending on the weather. So therefore, we use a non-farm employment. And then there's a real after-tax household income. Oh, that will be more like our take-home pay, net income. Real will mean like you take into account inflation. So all these four indicators, we have a special name for it. It's known as coincident indicator. So just remember that. That's how we calculate the recession. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Earlier when we look at these charts, right, we asked you to identify periods of time, periods of months, and we say that, hey, this economic fluctuation capture in terms of GDP growth, capture in terms of this unemployment rate. They are irregular, of course. If we know what's coming, I mean, who can paint the economy in the next 10 years? Nobody could. Who knows? We're going to be hit by hurricane, right? Nobody knows. This is the unknown factors are weather, political situation that affect economy. So economic fluctuation are irregular in terms of length and severity. Yeah, we agree. We look at it. We identify the highest number, and some numbers are not as high. There are a lot of factors behind it. Economic fluctuation are felt throughout the economy and may have global effect. Oh, yes. You're telling me. Yep. Because in this case, the hurricane affect about 4 states, right? So, yeah, it would affect the GDP a little bit, but not a lot, because we'll see next year. We'll look at the next year GDP. I don't think it would affect significantly, because, U.S. is 50 states. So here, let's look at this. Look at all the colors. So let's pick a color. Which color do you want to look at?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay, what's yellow?
Japan.
Japan. Wow, that's interesting. So each color represents each country. So we got Japan, Germany, US, Canada, and UK. These are all industrialized economy. And this is the kind of thing that when I give students project towards the end of the year, I told them this is kind of graph I like for you to do, So anyway, you see a pattern here. What's the pattern? How do you describe this? Everything is up, and then boop, right? And that was during the Great Recession. Almost went in, and then it goes up again. And although, what this is saying is that, yes, all these industrialized countries are affected by U.S. Great Recession, because we are trading partners one way or another. But then, of course, there's some variation. If you look at Japan, look at Germany. Germany seems to be doing quite well. And then, nevertheless, the same, plunge down, goes up again. Now, in the case of Japan, right, it's a little bit different. It experienced another dip around 2011, whereas these other countries did not, except for, what's this color here?
United Kingdom.
Is that US? Oh, that's UK, okay. So UK experienced another downturn right there, negative. So every time you see that, so this is growth rate, anything that's below that line right there means you have a negative growth rate. And definitely this is called recession, when you have something that's significant. But the nice thing about recession, sometimes we like to look at negative, we say, oh yeah, recession. The nice thing about recession is the next thing that when you look around next time, it's going up. That's how we should think about this rebuilding process. Be positive, the things are looking better, and so look on the bright side, yeah. We will get back to normal. Okay, next. So a while ago, Kai, I think it was you, mentioned the cyclical unemployment. So that is it, right here. So when you look at short-term economic fluctuation, we look at unemployment as one of the key indicators. And then we also look at GDP growth, as you have seen, because that's basically everything over there is about recession and expansion. In other words, the growth of GDP, whether it's positive or negative. Positive, it means it keeps going up. That's good. That's what we call expansion. Very simple. So if it is coming down, we call it recession. And if it is in a bigger degree, means longer period, more severe. The duration is longer, then we call it depression. Or in the case of expansion during the Second World War, we call it a boom, B-O-O-M. Okay, cyclical unemployment will rise sharply during recession. And then you have some problem there that is the real wages will not grow as much. And then people could not expect much promotion or bonuses. And that have been happening, I think, in this state of North Carolina for the last few years. We had not had any increase of bonuses because the economy was just simply not doing well. And how did it affect people? New labor market entrants have difficulty finding jobs. I remember that so clearly because in about 2009, well, yeah, actually when the Great Recession first hit, because I was already teaching here, I remember I was actually teaching some of the evening classes where we have a lot of non-traditional students, people who are mom and dad, people who have been out of the college, not even college, from high school for years, some of them like 25 years. I'll have grandpa, grandma sometime in my class, and so one of the reasons they gave is to say, well, we can find job, we got laid off, and so I might as well get a loan, come back to school, upgrade my skills. And a lot of our students were very concerned that they couldn't get a job after they graduated. I mean, eventually they did, but it just took much longer time when you have a recession to look for a job. Okay, so these are some of the negative effects of recession. Now, I want to make sure that you understand this slide here. So yes, we have recession. So what? Who are the people who are affected? To some extent, we all want to say, well, everybody's affected. But the truth is certain sectors are affected much more than other sectors. So now then the question would be, which sectors do you think will be most affected? Now when unemployment hit, right, do you think it affect the blue collar workers more or the white collar workers? Which one? Probably the blue collar workers, yeah. Because their jobs are not as high skill, low skill, manufacturing, assembly line, plants. So they're the one who get laid off first. So this is what it means. Your industry that produce durable goods, all your white stuff, microwave, refrigerator, washer dryers, all those are manufacturing. What is that? GE, yeah, General Electric stuff, what they produce. Or car, GMC, Toyota. These are durable goods. Computer, HP, Dell, Apple's. Okay, so then the non-durable and service industry. So yeah, here are some of the examples given. Cars, houses is considered durable goods. Capital equipment, machine, tractors, all this, lawnmower. So all this came from manufacturers. and they're considered durable goods. So they will be more affected in the service industries, like, banking, what we call, like, or teaching, people who work in a hospital, lawyers, professionals, in other words, yeah. They will be, those are considered service industry. Remember that. We asked you that on the test. Okay, I already told you that. Make a note of that. All right. Next. This is interesting. We got two colors here. So what does it mean? The red line means inflation. What about all the shades of blue? What are they? These are the period of recession we just talked about. So more or less you can see a patterns, right? Some economies actually went to this pain to try to discover theory. They say, oh, look at this, we could draw this inflation line here. But guess what? You could also, every time you have an inflation going up, and before it comes down, usually you experience some sort of recession. And that's true. Because remember during it is right here. That's what I was trying to point. 2009, we had that great recession, right? Remember we talked about it, I think in the earlier chapter we have deflation. Remember what is deflation? Negative inflation, right? So there it is, you got a negative inflation there, you got a deflation there. So what this is saying is every time you experience some sort of recession, which is a blue-shaped part, you also experience low unemployment rate. What did I say? Low inflation rate, or close to something called deflation. And that is true right here. It doesn't have to be negative, it just happened that in those years it became negative. But the point it is on the downside, the inflation. So if you look at the two oil shock years, 70s and 80s, and you see that patterns as well. So that's what it means here. Recessions are usually followed by a decline in inflation and may have been preceded by an increase in inflation. In other words, you could actually draw out the shape, of recession. And after the recession, you see that you experience not deflation, but, inflation is coming down. We will actually talk more about it when we relate that more to the whole macro economy. Okay.